A dangerous and complex stretch of weather is unfolding across a massive portion of the United States right now, and we are talking about multiple overlapping threats that will affect tens of millions of people from the East Coast all the way through the heartland. We have severe thunderstorms already firing across the mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas right now, bringing the threat of damaging winds, large hail, and tornadoes. But the story does not end there. A rare coastal low-pressure system is expected to develop off the coast of New York City and spin up significant rainfall across southern New England, raising serious flash flood concerns. And then, just when you think things might settle down, another large and potent storm system is going to fire up across the Central Plains, the Midwest, and potentially the mid-Mississippi Valley by Thursday and Friday. And Friday in particular is already looking like it could be one of the more significant severe weather setups we have seen in recent memory. On top of all of that, there's extreme heat gripping portions of the country that has produced feels-like temperatures that are genuinely difficult to believe. This is a forecast that demands your full attention. We are going to break every piece of it down for you right now. Before we get into the full forecast breakdown for the coming days, we need to take a moment to talk about what happened yesterday, because it is critical context for understanding just how active this weather pattern really is. Near Menasha, Wisconsin, just south of Appleton, a major tornado touched down yesterday and caused devastating, widespread destruction across a large area. More than 100,000 people were included in a particularly dangerous situation. Tornado warning right around lunchtime, and this channel was live covering that event as it unfolded. Drone footage captured by storm chaser CJ Zagler shows the extent of the damage on the ground, and it is genuinely heartbreaking to look at. You can see homes that were ripped completely off their foundations. Roofs were torn away from entire neighborhoods. Trampolines were tossed. Pools were launched through the air. Estimates suggest that well over 1,000 homes and buildings were at minimum damaged and in many cases completely destroyed by this tornado. The tornado itself was likely on the ground for well over half an hour as it tracked from the south side of Appleton out over the water. That movement over water likely spared additional communities from even worse damage, including Neenah, Wisconsin, which sits just south of Menasha. Had that tornado stayed over land and continued tracking through populated areas, the outcome could have been far more catastrophic. Hundreds, if not thousands, of residents were out walking through their own neighborhoods in the aftermath, trying to process what had happened and figure out where they were going to sleep that night. At least 100 homes in that area had no roof remaining. If you have friends or family in the south side of Appleton, please take a moment to check in on them. This is an incredibly difficult time for that community, and recovery is going to take time. Now let's shift into today's forecast because the threat is very much ongoing and there are areas right now that need to be paying close attention. The Storm Prediction Center has a large, slight risk of severe weather in place across the mid-Atlantic and into the Northeast for today, which is Tuesday. The primary area of concern includes Washington, D.C., the Chesapeake region, and stretches back through Charlotte and Columbia. If you live anywhere in this corridor, today is a day where you need to have your weather alerts active and a plan ready before the afternoon hours arrive. Isolated severe storms are also possible across a much broader area, stretching from New York City back through Nashville and even Atlanta, Georgia. So the reach of today's severe weather threat is genuinely significant in terms of geographic scope. The main hazard today is going to be straight-line damaging wind gusts. We are talking wind speeds in the range of 55 to 70 miles per hour, and the highest risk for those damaging gusts is concentrated along the corridor from Washington, D.C. back into Charlotte. If you are in that zone, that means downed trees, potential power outages, and dangerous driving conditions are all on the table this afternoon and evening. There will also be some potential for isolated large hail today, but I want to be straightforward with you. I think the hail threat is going to be a low-end concern, not the headline story. The headline story is those wind gusts. Now, there is also a 5% tornado risk in place for today, and I want to put that in perspective for you because it is actually worth noting. That 5% tornado probability is technically a higher tornado risk on the scale than what was in place yesterday over the Midwest. And yet we saw that significant destructive tornado near Appleton. The counties and areas sitting inside today's tornado risk include Richmond, Raleigh, Greenville, Greensboro, and back near Danville. There's also a broader isolated tornado threat extending from Washington, D.C. all the way down into Rock Hill, South Carolina. Now, I want to be very clear about something here. Just because today's tornado risk is technically higher on the scale does not mean we should expect a more severe or more destructive event than what we saw yesterday in the Midwest. In fact, the probability of EF2 or stronger tornadoes today across this region is very low. The atmosphere today is different, and I do not want anyone walking away from this thinking we are necessarily heading into a catastrophic tornado outbreak. What I am saying is that the risk is real, it is measurable, and it is absolutely worth taking seriously. Have multiple ways to receive weather alerts today. Know where you will go if a warning is issued for your area. Let me walk you through the timing of today's severe weather so you know exactly what windows to watch. Right now, this morning, there are already thunderstorms ongoing from the New York City area back toward Knoxville, and those storms are primarily producing isolated damaging winds through the morning hours. The atmosphere this morning is not yet at its most volatile, and so we expect the overall threat to remain lower through midday. The afternoon is where things get more interesting. There's a real question about how much destabilization we see across the mid-Atlantic as we head into the early afternoon hours. More destabilization means a more robust, severe weather threat. By around 3 o'clock Eastern Time, we are expecting clusters of thunderstorms to be ongoing near Allentown and back toward Washington, D.C., with damaging wind gusts being the primary concern. Between 4 and 5 o'clock, eastern storm activity is expected to become more widespread, spreading from D.C. and Allentown up toward Albany. Much of that activity further north will not be severe, but the storms closer to Washington, D.C. and southward could absolutely reach severe criteria. And those supercells are the type of storm most capable of producing tornadoes. The best time window for any tornado potential today will run from approximately 3 o'clock Eastern until about 9 o'clock Eastern this evening. If you live just west of Virginia Beach or just south of Richmond, that is the area I am watching most carefully for that tornado threat today. Stay weather aware through this entire afternoon and evening. Do not let your guard down until this activity pushes offshore tonight. And here is where the story takes a genuinely unusual turn. As this storm activity moves offshore tonight into the overnight hours, it is going to help spin up a pretty rare coastal low-pressure system developing right off the coast near New York City. This kind of system does not form every year, and what makes it particularly interesting is what it is going to do over the next day or two. This coastal low is expected to bring heavy rainfall to southern New England and could actually intensify as we head into Thursday. As it continues to spin right along the coastline, it could produce some pretty strong wind gusts out near Nantucket and Cape Cod as well. But the primary concern with this system is going to be rainfall and flash flooding. Some of the pockets of heaviest rainfall with this coastal low could easily pick up well over 3 to 4 inches of rain. Hartford, Providence, Boston, Worcester, and the Nantucket area are all in the zone for significant rainfall totals from this event, and any of those locations could see several inches accumulate in a relatively short period. That kind of rainfall rate raises real concerns for flash flooding, and I want you to take that seriously. Along the immediate coastline from New York City back through Virginia Beach, get ready for the potential for significant flash flooding today and tomorrow as well. The Weather Prediction Center has already placed a moderate risk of excessive rainfall in effect near New York City up toward the Catskill region for today. And even into Wednesday, a slight risk of excessive rainfall extends across southern New England. That is a multi-day flooding threat being highlighted by meteorologists at the national level, and it deserves your attention. If you are driving and you come across a flooded roadway, please turn around. Do not drive through it. I cannot say this enough. Flooded roads claim lives every single year because people underestimate the depth or the current of the water they are looking at. Your car can be swept away in just a foot or two of moving water. Do not put yourself in that situation. It is never worth it. Emergency responders are stretched during these events. The last thing you want is to need to be rescued from a flooded vehicle. Please make smart decisions on the roadways over the next couple of days. Now let's talk about Wednesday, because while it is going to be a quieter severe weather day compared to today, it is not entirely quiet. On Wednesday, the severe weather threat is anticipated to be considerably more isolated across the country. There is a slight risk of severe weather across Florida and Georgia, and a marginal threat has been identified across the northern plains. The main concerns on Wednesday will be isolated damaging wind gusts and perhaps some isolated large hail. The highest concentration of storm activity on Wednesday will be right along the Florida-Georgia border, where damaging wind gusts could be a bit more notable during the very late afternoon and evening hours. Additionally, there will be some storm activity firing around and just east of the Rockies on Wednesday, producing isolated severe weather as well. But overall, Wednesday is going to be a pretty typical severe weather day for the month of July. Take advantage of any relative quiet, because what comes next is what really deserves your attention. Thursday and Friday are shaping up to be the main event for the back half of this week across the central and northern plains, the Midwest, and potentially the mid-Mississippi Valley. A shortwave trough is expected to move over the Rockies on Thursday, and how that system evolves is going to play a major role in determining exactly how significant the severe weather threat ends up being through the end of the week. Right now, models are showing several clusters of thunderstorms developing during the early to mid-afternoon hours on Thursday, stretching from Fargo, North Dakota, back down toward North Platte. Damaging winds will be the greatest concern with this activity. Large hail and the possibility of an isolated tornado or two will also be on the table for Thursday. Some model runs have actually been somewhat aggressive in suggesting the potential for an isolated significant tornado on Thursday across areas like Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota, especially in areas where low-level winds are running stronger. If the storms on Thursday end up being a bit more discrete in nature rather than clustering together, localized tornado threat could actually be higher. But there is a lot of uncertainty in the Thursday setup right now, and I want to be honest with you about that. We do not have a locked-in picture yet for how Thursday is going to play out. What we can say is that Friday looks even more consequential. Models, including the GFS and others, are showing a very interesting and potentially very dangerous severe weather setup developing on Friday, which happens to be the very last day of July. The low-pressure system that has been tracking eastward is expected to intensify further as it moves over Iowa and Missouri on Friday. There would be a localized area of stronger wind shear in place across Illinois particularly, and that combination of ingredients, an intensifying surface, low, strong wind shear, and favorable atmospheric moisture, could come together to produce a significant severe weather outbreak. The setup on Friday features a large cutoff low positioned near the St. Louis and Chicago area with very strong southwesterly and southerly flow in place across Illinois and Missouri. That kind of setup with those kinds of ingredients is the type of pattern that meteorologists look at and immediately recognize as having the potential for a significant tornado day. Now, there are still a lot of unknowns, and how Thursday's storm activity evolves will have downstream effects on Friday. But the ceiling for what could happen on Friday is high. I want to be direct about that. This looks like a classic severe weather setup for the final day of July, and if the pieces come together, we could be looking at some big problems across the Midwest on Friday. Stay tuned and stay weather aware as we get closer. Looking further into the weekend, the low pressure system is expected to continue tracking east and make its way into the Tennessee Valley by Saturday. That movement could generate additional severe weather, but Saturday currently looks like it will be a bit more isolated and lower end compared to what Friday might bring. The tornado threat by Saturday should drop off compared to Friday's potential. Then, as we head into Sunday and Monday, that storm system will begin to weaken. For the first few days of August, the significant severe weather threat looks to be on the lower side. That said, I would keep an eye on the northern plains and the Midwest for at least some shots at isolated severe weather during those first couple of days of August. There may also be a new severe weather event developing over the northern plains by next Sunday that could track into the Midwest by Monday, so we will watch that closely as we get through the week. Now, I do want to make sure we cover one more critical part of this forecast, and that is the extreme heat. Because while the severe weather threat is getting a lot of attention, and rightfully so, the heat that has been gripping portions of the country over the last several days has been genuinely dangerous and in some cases record-setting. If you remember from a couple of days ago, St. Louis recorded a feels-like temperature of 124 degrees Fahrenheit. Let that number sink in for a moment. 124 degrees. That is a level of heat that can be life-threatening in a very short period of time, especially for vulnerable populations, including the elderly, young children, and anyone working outdoors. That kind of extreme heat stress on the human body is not something to take lightly. Here's the relief part of that story, though, and it is good news. That oppressive heat is going to begin to ease as we head into Wednesday. Well, cooler air pushing down from the north and drier air filtering into the Ohio Valley and parts of the Midwest will knock those temperatures and feels-like values down considerably by Wednesday. That is meaningful and welcome relief for a lot of communities that have been dealing with dangerous conditions. However, I want to make sure you understand that the relief is not going to be universal. If you live along the Gulf Coast, the heat is still going to be very much in play on Wednesday. Areas like Jacksonville and Tallahassee could still be looking at feels-like temperatures around 110 degrees on Wednesday. Oklahoma and locations closer to Sioux Falls and Fargo are still going to be running over 100 degrees for feels-like values on Wednesday as well. So the relief is real, but it is regional. By Thursday morning, the picture improves significantly across much of the Ohio Valley and the Northeast. The air is going to feel genuinely different, cooler, drier, more comfortable. And for folks in the Midwest and Ohio Valley, it should feel like a genuine break after days of punishing heat. But I also want to prepare you for what comes next. That moisture and heat are expected to return by Friday, which coincides with that potent severe weather setup we talked about earlier. So enjoy the couple of days of relief while you have them, because the atmosphere is going to reload heading into the weekend. Let me take a step back and give you the full week picture one more time so you have a clear mental map of what is coming. Today, Tuesday, the primary threat is damaging winds across the mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas, with a secondary tornado concern in Virginia and North Carolina from mid-afternoon through this evening. Flash flooding is an elevated concern along the coast from New York City down through Virginia Beach. Wednesday brings a coastal low that continues to produce heavy rainfall and flash flood risks across southern New England, from Hartford and Providence up through Boston and Worcester and out toward Nantucket. Severe weather on Wednesday is isolated and relatively low impact overall. Thursday is a day where the central and northern plains from South Dakota and Minnesota down through Kansas and Nebraska will need to pay attention with the potential for damaging winds, hail, and possibly isolated tornadoes depending on how storms evolve. Friday is the day that has the highest ceiling for severe weather this week, with a potentially significant setup developing across Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri, where an intensifying low and strong wind shear could come together for a classic tornado-capable setup. Saturday sees that system track into the Tennessee Valley with some additional but more isolated severe weather potential. And the weekend into early next week is generally quieter, with some lower-end shots at severe weather across the northern plains and Midwest. This is a relentlessly active pattern, and the volume of people who are going to be impacted by at least one of these threats over the next several days is enormous. Whether you are dealing with the severe thunderstorm threat today in the mid-Atlantic, the flash flooding concerns in New England over the next 2 days, the heat along the Gulf Coast and southern plains this week, or watching the Thursday-Friday severe weather setup develop across the Midwest and Central Plains, this forecast affects you. Please make sure your weather alerts are active. Make sure your family and your household has a plan. Know where your safe place is if a tornado warning is issued. Know what to do if flash flooding threatens your neighborhood or your commute. These are not hypothetical scenarios. They are real threats that will unfold over real communities across the United States in the coming days. We will absolutely have more updates on this channel as we get closer to Thursday and Friday, because the forecast will evolve and the details will sharpen. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss any of those updates. The Thursday-Friday setup in particular is one that we are going to be watching very closely, and there may be live coverage on this channel depending on how things develop. Click the bell icon so you get notified the moment we go live. We also have a 24/7 live weather stream running on the channel with live weather cameras, storm chaser footage, live weather alerts, and more. Check that out if you want continuous coverage as this active pattern continues to unfold. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. For those of you who are new here, welcome. Make sure to subscribe and join this community because we cover severe weather as seriously and as accurately as we possibly can, and there is going to be a lot to cover over the next several days. Hopefully everyone in the Appleton and Menasha area is finding the support and resources they need in the aftermath of yesterday's tornado. And for everyone else across the country watching these threats develop, stay informed, stay safe, and we will see you in the next update or live stream.